The cemetery had never known silence like this. Snow drifted between forgotten gravestones while 20 enormous white wolves stood perfectly still around one lonely grave. None growled. None moved. Their glowing eyes never left the weathered tombstone bearing the name of the only man who had ever loved an unwanted Omega. She froze. Everyone had warned her that wolves gathered before a killing. But when the largest wolf stepped forward, the others lowered their heads instead. The giant beast looked into her frightened eyes with something she never expected to see. Regret. Then before the first ray of sunrise touched the snow, the impossible happened. The legendary Alpha King shifted into human form and slowly dropped to one knee before her father's grave. His voice was calm but heavy with 20 years of guilt. I came to repay a debt that should have been honored long ago. Elara's heart stopped. Her father had died as a forgotten outcast. So why was the most powerful Alpha King in the world kneeling before his grave? And why had 20 royal white wolves been guarding it in complete silence all these years? The answer hidden beneath that weathered tombstone would uncover a betrayal powerful enough to shake the entire kingdom. The first light of winter struggled to break through the heavy gray clouds hanging over Ashwood village. Cold wind swept across the empty fields carrying tiny snowflakes that landed softly on the worn path leading to the old cemetery. Almost no one came here anymore. The graves belonged to people the village had already forgotten. Among them stood one lonely tombstone leaning slightly to one side. Its carved letters had faded beneath years of rain, snow, and neglect. Rowan Ashwood. Simple name. No title. No honor. No flowers. Only silence. A young woman slowly climbed the hill carrying a small basket of fresh white lilies wrapped carefully inside an old cloth. Her name was Elara Ashwood. The villagers knew her only as the rejected Omega whose life seemed cursed from the day she was born. Her boots sank into the fresh snow with every step, yet she never complained. She had made this journey every year since losing her father. No matter how harsh the weather became, she always returned. Because if she did not remember him, no one else would. She knelt beside the weathered stone and gently brushed away the snow covering his name. A soft smile appeared despite the sadness in her eyes. I brought your favorite flowers, father. Her voice was barely louder than the wind. I know everyone else forgot you. But I never will. She carefully placed the lilies against the stone before removing a small wooden carving from her pocket. It was a tiny wolf. The last gift Rowan had carved with his own hands before he disappeared forever. Its edges had become smooth after years of being held whenever loneliness became too heavy. Elara closed her eyes. For a moment she could almost hear his warm laughter. Almost feel his rough hand resting gently on her head. Almost believe he was still alive. Then a strange sound echoed through the cemetery. Crunch, crunch, crunch. Snow shifted somewhere beyond the trees. Her eyes opened instantly. The forest had become completely silent. No birds. No wind. Nothing. Every instinct told her something was wrong. She slowly stood. Her heart began beating faster. Another sound. Closer this time. Crunch. Crunch. A massive white wolf stepped out from between the snow-covered pines. Its thick winter fur shimmered beneath the pale morning light. Its bright silver eyes locked onto hers. Elara froze. Another wolf appeared. Then another. Then another. Within seconds 20 enormous white wolves surrounded her father's grave in perfect silence. None bared their teeth. None growled. None showed any sign of aggression. They simply stood. Watching. Waiting. Elara's breathing became shallow. Every story she had ever heard rushed through her mind. Royal white wolves never traveled this far south. They belonged only to the Alpha King's territory. And they never appeared without reason. She slowly backed away from the grave. The wolves did not move. They only watched her with calm, patient eyes. Then something even stranger happened. One by one, every wolf lowered its head toward Rowan's grave. Not toward her. Toward her father. Elara stared in disbelief. What are you doing? The wolves remained perfectly still. almost as though they were standing guard over someone they deeply respected. Tears began filling her eyes. Her father had died as a forgotten laborer, a man mocked by his own pack, a man buried without honor. So why would royal wolves bow before his grave? The question barely formed inside her mind before the largest wolf stepped forward. He was unlike the others. Larger, stronger. His snow-white coat glowed almost silver beneath the rising sun. A faint scar crossed one golden eye. Power rolled from him like invisible waves. Even without shifting, everyone in the kingdom would have recognized him. Alpha King Kael Frostfang. Elara's knees almost gave way. Every terrifying story about the legendary ruler flashed through her memory. The undefeated king. The beast who conquered rogue armies. The alpha no enemy had ever defeated. He stopped only a few feet from Rowan's grave. His golden eyes slowly lifted toward the old tombstone. Pain filled them. Not anger. Not pride. Pain. The other 19 wolves lowered themselves completely onto the snow. Their heads remained bowed. The cemetery became silent once again. Kael closed his eyes. A burst of silver light surrounded his enormous body. Moments later, the legendary Alpha King stood where the wolf had been. Broad-shouldered. Dressed in black royal armor trimmed with white fur. Snowflakes settled quietly upon his dark hair. Without looking at Elara, he slowly walked toward Rowan's grave. Then before the forgotten tombstone, the king of every northern pack lowered himself onto one knee. His head bowed with complete respect. Elara could not breathe. No king bowed before common men, especially not before forgotten Omegas. Several long moments passed before Kael finally spoke. His deep voice carried across the silent cemetery. I am late. His words trembled with regret. Far too late. Elara swallowed hard. Who are you talking to? The Alpha King never looked away from the grave. I am speaking to the only man who gave everything so that I could live. Elara felt the world spin beneath her feet. Her father. Impossible. My father was nobody. Kael finally turned toward her. His expression held no pride. Only sorrow. No. His voice remained calm. Your father was the greatest man I have ever known. Before Elara could ask another question, a sharp metallic sound echoed from deep inside the forest. Kael's eyes narrowed instantly. Commander Thorn stepped forward. My king. We are no longer alone. Hidden somewhere among the trees, someone had been watching every second of their meeting. And whoever it was, had no intention of letting the truth remain buried. The silence shattered. Commander Thorn's warning echoed through the cemetery as every white wolf lifted its head at the exact same moment. Their ears twitched toward the dark forest while low growls rumbled deep inside their chests. Kael rose from one knee in a single smooth motion. The warmth that had briefly appeared in his eyes disappeared behind the cold discipline of a king. Stay behind me, he ordered. Elara wanted to ask 100 questions, but something in his voice told her this was not the moment. She stepped back toward her father's grave while the 20 royal wolves quietly formed a protective circle around both her and the tombstone. No panic. No confusion. Every movement was practiced. Every wolf knew exactly where to stand. It looked less like an escort and more like soldiers defending a sacred monument. Kael stared into the trees. I know you're there. Only silence answered him. Snow drifted gently between the towering pines. A raven suddenly burst from the branches above, disappearing into the gray sky. Nothing else moved. Commander Thorn slowly lowered his sword. They've retreated. Kael did not look convinced. No. They only wanted to know if I came. His words made Elara's heart tighten. Someone had expected the Alpha King to visit her father's grave. Someone had been waiting. Kael turned back toward the weathered tombstone. His hand rested gently against the cold stone. I promised him I would return. I failed. Elara could no longer remain silent. My father was only a carpenter. He never fought in wars. He never served the crown. He spent every day trying to earn enough food for us. Kael closed his eyes. When you were a child. He wanted you to believe that. Elara frowned. What do you mean? The Alpha King remained silent for several moments before speaking again. Your father carried burdens no daughter should inherit. He wanted you to remember him as a kind father, not as a soldier. The winter wind carried snow across the cemetery as Kael's thoughts drifted 20 years into the past. I was barely older than you are now. It was my first campaign. I believed strength alone could win every battle. A faint smile crossed his face. I was wrong. The frozen valley of Moonpine had become a battlefield. Broken wagons burned beneath the falling snow. Royal soldiers fought desperately against hundreds of rogue wolves who poured from every direction. Young Prince Kael stood surrounded. His armor was cracked. Blood stained the snow beneath his feet. One by one his guards fell. He lifted his sword one final time. Then an enemy spear flew through the air. There was no time to dodge. No time to defend. Only death. Until someone stepped between them. Rowan Ashwood. The spear pierced Rowan's shoulder instead. Ignoring the wound, Rowan grabbed the weapon with both hands before throwing it aside. Run, he shouted. Young Kael refused. I'm not leaving you. You will. Rowan smiled despite the blood running down his arm. You carry a kingdom on your shoulders. I carry only one life. Go. Those words haunted Kael every day afterward. Rowan held the narrow mountain pass alone while Kael escaped with the surviving soldiers. Dozens of enemies charged him. Yet he never stepped aside. Not once. When reinforcements finally returned, Rowan had vanished. Only blood remained in the snow. Kael slowly opened his eyes. I searched for him for months. When I finally found your village, I learned he had returned quietly. He never told anyone what happened. Elara stared at him. Why? Because he believed heroes belonged in stories, not in homes. Tears formed in her eyes. That sounded exactly like her father. He had always avoided praise. Always changed the subject whenever someone thanked him for even the smallest kindness. But, she whispered, if he survived, why did nobody know? Kael's face darkened. Because every official record disappeared. The battle, the reports, the witness statements, everything. It was as if someone wanted Rowan Ashwood erased from history. Elara looked back at the old grave. For years she had believed the village elders when they called her father a failure. Now the king himself claimed Rowan had saved an entire kingdom. Both stories could not be true. So, someone lied. Kael nodded once. Yes, and I intend to learn why. Commander Thorn approached carrying a small leather pouch. My king, we found this beneath the memorial stone. Elara frowned. It wasn't there before. Thorn carefully handed the pouch to Kael. Inside lay a faded silver wolf pendant stained with age. Kael's breathing stopped. I gave this to Rowan. He wore it the day he disappeared. Someone had secretly placed it beneath the grave. Recently, not 20 years ago, someone had been here, watching, waiting, protecting the truth, or hiding it. Before anyone could speak again, whip, an arrow screamed through the air. Kael moved instantly. His sword flashed. Steel met wood. The arrow split in half before reaching Elara. The cemetery exploded into movement. The 20 white wolves charged toward the forest. Commander Thorn pointed toward the trees. Assassin! A dark figure sprinted between the pines. Kael shifted into his massive white wolf in a burst of silver light and launched after the fleeing attacker with impossible speed. Elara could only watch in stunned silence. Moments later the sounds of battle echoed through the forest. Metal clashed. Branches snapped. A single cry rang through the snow. Silence. Several minutes later, Commander Thorne returned carrying the assassin's lifeless body. Kael followed behind him. His white fur was streaked with fresh blood. Not his own. Thorne knelt beside the corpse and pulled back the assassin's heavy cloak. A polished silver crest gleamed upon the man's armor. Elara's eyes widened. She recognized the symbol. It belonged to the Royal Council. Kael stared at the emblem without speaking. His jaw tightened. The attack had answered one question. Someone inside the kingdom's highest ranks wanted Rowan Ashwood's story buried forever. But it also created a far more dangerous mystery. If the Royal Council had sent an assassin to a forgotten grave, what secret was worth killing for? Morning never truly arrived. Dark clouds swallowed the sun as the cemetery remained wrapped in silence after the assassin's death. The broken arrow still lay half buried in the snow. Elara could not stop staring at the silver crest carved into the assassin's armor. The Royal Council, the very people sworn to protect the kingdom, had tried to kill her beside her father's grave. Nothing made sense anymore. Kael stood quietly beside Rowan's tombstone, his expression unreadable. Finally he spoke. "This changes everything." Commander Thorne nodded. "They know you've started asking questions." Kael's golden eyes never left the grave. "No. They know Elara is alive." Those words sent a chill through everyone present. Elara looked at him. "Why would they fear me?" Kael slowly faced her. "Because you are Rowan Ashwood's daughter. For 20 years they believed every trace of him had vanished. But blood remembers." Before Elara could answer, Commander Thorne reached beneath the weathered tombstone. "There is something here." The captain brushed away years of frozen dirt until his fingers touched old iron. "Hidden lock." Kael frowned. "I visited this grave many times. I never noticed it." Thorne pulled a narrow dagger from his belt and carefully forced the rusted latch open. With a deep grinding sound, a flat stone shifted aside. Beneath it rested a small wooden chest wrapped in faded leather. Time had darkened its surface, but the Ashwood family symbol was still visible. Elara's hands trembled. "My father made this." She recognized every carved line. Rowan had always decorated his wooden creations with tiny wolves hidden among the branches. Kael carefully lifted the chest into the light. The old lock had already been broken. Someone had opened it before. Recently. Snow had not yet settled inside. Kael exchanged a silent glance with Thorne. "We weren't the first." Elara's heart pounded. If someone opened it, they were looking for something. Kael nodded. Or trying to make sure no one else found it. Slowly he opened the lid. Inside lay 3 weathered journals tied together with faded leather cords. A folded battlefield map. An old military badge covered in dried blood. And one sealed letter. The seal bore Rowan's personal mark. Across the front were only 6 words. "For my daughter. If I never return." Elara stopped breathing. For years she had dreamed that her father had left her one final message. Now it was resting in front of her. Touch. She reached toward it but hesitated. Her fingers shook. "I don't know if I can." Kael gently placed the letter back inside the chest. "Not yet." She looked at him in surprise. "Why?" "Because someone already searched this chest. If they left the letter behind, they were looking for something else." Commander Thorne untied the journals. The first pages were ordinary. Village records, woodworking sketches, lists of supplies. Exactly what everyone would expect from a simple carpenter. Then halfway through the first journal, the writing changed. Rowan described troop movements, hidden mountain trails, secret supply routes, enemy numbers, battle strategies. Elara stared at the pages. "My father wrote all this." Kael smiled sadly. "He wasn't only a soldier. He became my greatest scout." The second journal revealed even darker secrets. Royal officers, secret meetings, missing supplies, large payments made to unknown nobles. Every page pointed toward corruption inside the kingdom itself. Commander Thorne's face hardened. He found them. Kael nodded. He discovered someone was selling military information. Elara looked from one man to the other. So my father knew who betrayed the kingdom. He knew. Kael answered quietly. And that knowledge almost certainly killed him. The cemetery became silent again. Everything Elara believed about her father was disappearing. He had never been forgotten because he was weak. He had been erased because he knew too much. Thorne opened the final journal. Its pages were nearly empty. Only the last entry remained. The ink had faded with time. Kael carefully read aloud. If anything happens to me, trust no one wearing the council crest. The truth sleeps beneath the moon shrine. Protect my daughter. The writing ended there. No signature. No final goodbye. Only unfinished words. Elara pressed a hand against her mouth as tears rolled down her face. He knew. He knew he wasn't coming home. Kael closed the journal slowly. He wasn't afraid for himself. He was afraid for you. A cold gust swept through the cemetery. One of the white wolves suddenly growled. Another lifted its head toward the forest. Commander Thorne immediately reached for his sword. We're being watched again. Kael looked toward the distant mountains. No. They're already moving. We have to reach the moon shrine before the council does. Just then, one of the royal scouts burst through the trees, breathing heavily. My king! Kael turned sharply. What happened? The safe house. It has been burned. Commander Thorne frowned. Our witnesses. The scout lowered his head. Gone. Kael's expression darkened. And Elder Garrick. The scout hesitated. He disappeared before the attack. Thorne's face lost all color. Elder Garrick carried the last surviving battle records. Elara looked between them. Can we still find him? Before anyone answered, a frightened howl echoed through the forest. Every white wolf lifted its head at once. Commander Thorne listened carefully. His expression changed instantly. My king! That was Garrick's guardian wolf. Kael's eyes narrowed. Which means... Thorne finished the sentence. Either he's running for his life, or someone has already found him. The haunting howl echoed through the frozen forest long after it faded into silence. Every royal wolf stood perfectly still. Their silver eyes remained fixed toward the northern mountains. Kael's expression hardened. We're leaving. Commander Thorne immediately began organizing the wolves. 2 scouts disappeared into the trees while the others surrounded Elara without needing a single command. She noticed something strange. None of them walked ahead of her. None walked behind. Instead they formed a protective circle as if shielding someone precious. Elara looked at Kael. They're protecting me. Kael nodded. They've been protecting you for years. She stopped walking. What? The Alpha King looked toward the distant mountains before answering. You believed your father died alone. He didn't. He gave us one final order. The words caught inside Elara's throat. What order? Kael looked at the 20 white wolves surrounding her. Protect my daughter. Silence settled over the forest. Even the wind seemed to disappear. Commander Thorne finally spoke. Not one of us disobeyed. Elara stared at the wolves. But I've never seen any of you before. Thorne smiled faintly. That was the point. We protected you from the shadows. When you walked through the village. When you gathered firewood. When you visited your father's grave. There was always one of us nearby. Elara searched the faces of the wolves. Memories slowly returned. There had always been strange footprints outside her cabin after heavy snow. Sometimes she had caught flashes of white fur disappearing into the forest. She had believed they were wild animals. Now she understood. She had never truly been alone. Tears welled in her eyes. They kept his promise. Kael nodded quietly. For 20 years. No one spoke again until they reached a narrow stone bridge crossing an icy river. The bridge overlooked a deep valley where snow-covered pine trees stretched toward the horizon. Commander Thorne suddenly stopped. He knelt beside the frozen ground. There was a fight here. Broken arrows lay scattered across the snow. Fresh blood stained the white ice. Kael crouched beside one of the crimson marks. "It's recent." One of the wolves growled softly before disappearing into the trees. Moments later it returned carrying a torn piece of dark cloth. Commander Thorne recognized it immediately. Elder Garrick. Elara looked around nervously. "Is he dead?" Thorne slowly shook his head. "No. There isn't enough blood. He was taken." Kael clenched his jaw. "They reached him before we did." The Alpha King stood and looked toward the towering mountains. "If Garrick is alive, they'll force him to reveal where the remaining evidence is hidden." Elara stepped closer. "Can we save him?" Kael looked into her determined eyes. "We will. But first you deserve the truth." He turned toward the wolves. "Show her." Without hesitation, every white wolf walked into a clearing surrounded by ancient oak trees. One by one they sat in a perfect circle. Then something extraordinary happened. Each wolf lowered its head toward Elara. Commander Thorne stepped forward. "Every one of these wolves represents a life your father saved." Elara's eyes widened. Thorne pointed to the oldest wolf. "During the Battle of Moonpine, my father would have died without Rowan." He pointed to another. "His brother." Another. "His son." One by one he named every wolf, every family, every life, every sacrifice. Each warrior owed their survival to Rowan Ashwood. None of them had forgotten. For 20 years they had gathered every winter at Rowan's grave before sunrise. Never for ceremony. Never for duty. For gratitude. Elara covered her mouth as tears streamed freely down her cheeks. "My father. He saved all of you." Commander Thorne smiled proudly. "He saved far more than us. He saved the kingdom." Kael stepped beside her. But history remembered someone else. The Alpha King's voice carried quiet anger. Someone accepted Rowan's honor. Someone claimed his victories. Elara slowly looked toward him. "Who?" Kael's expression darkened. "I don't know. But we're getting closer." Just then one of the royal scouts raced into the clearing. His breathing was uneven. "My king." Kael turned immediately. "What happened?" "The council has moved. They've sealed every road leading to Frost Castle." Commander Thorne frowned. "They're acting too quickly." The scout swallowed hard. "There's more." He handed Kael a rolled parchment sealed with crimson wax. Kael broke the seal. His eyes narrowed as he read. Elara noticed the color leave his face. "What is it?" Without speaking, Kael handed her the parchment. Across the top was the official seal of the Royal Council. Beneath it were only a few lines. "By order of the Royal Council, Elara Ashwood is hereby declared an enemy of the Crown. She is accused of stealing royal military records and conspiring against the throne. Any citizen who shelters her shall face execution." Elara stared at the words in disbelief. "I've never even been inside the castle." Commander Thorne crushed the snow beneath his boots. "They're making the first move." Kael folded the proclamation slowly. "No. They're panicking. They know the truth is getting closer." Faraway church bells began ringing across the kingdom. Not to celebrate. To announce a royal decree. Every village would hear Elara's name before sunset. Every bounty hunter. Every mercenary. Every corrupt noble. The entire kingdom would soon believe that Rowan Ashwood's innocent daughter had become the Crown's most wanted criminal. Kael looked at the 20 white wolves surrounding her. His voice was calm but filled with absolute certainty. "From this moment forward, no one touches her." The wolves answered with one powerful united howl that echoed across the frozen mountains. Hidden beyond the trees, A cloaked woman watched the scene with cold, emotionless eyes. A faint smile appeared on her lips. Lady Seraphine had finally forced the game into the open. The royal decree spread across the kingdom like wildfire. Before sunset, every village knew the name Elara Ashwood. Not as an innocent Omega, but as a traitor. Bounty hunters sharpened their blades. Mercenaries accepted contracts. Even ordinary travelers whispered that the daughter of a forgotten carpenter had betrayed the crown. Only a handful of people knew the truth. She was being hunted because her father had been a hero. Kael looked toward the snow-covered mountains rising beyond the forest. Our enemies already control the roads. Commander Thorne nodded. They'll expect us to run toward Frost Castle. Kael mounted his white stallion. Then we won't. We're going back to where everything began. Elara looked at him. The battlefield. The valley of Moonpine. The place where your father saved my life. The journey lasted 2 days. The farther north they traveled, the colder the wind became. Ancient pine forests covered the mountains like an endless sea of white. Frozen rivers shimmered beneath thick sheets of ice. The 20 white wolves moved silently through the woods, always keeping pace with the horses. Every evening they disappeared into the darkness before returning before dawn. Watching, protecting, waiting. During the second night, they stopped beside an abandoned watchtower. A small fire crackled inside the ruined stone walls. Elara sat quietly beside the flames, staring into the dancing light. Kael noticed the carved wolf she held tightly in her hands. You miss him. She smiled sadly. Every day. She looked toward the stars. When I was little, Father always told me that the brightest stars belonged to people who kept their promises. She laughed softly through her tears. I thought it was just another bedtime story. Kael's expression became distant. It wasn't. He believed promises lived longer than people. Silence settled between them. Finally, Elara asked the question she had feared since meeting him. If my father saved your life, why didn't you come sooner? Kael lowered his eyes. I tried. The first time I returned to your village, I was told Rowan had abandoned his family. The second time, I learned he had died from illness. The third time, the village itself had changed. No one even remembered where he was buried. Elara frowned. Someone lied to you. Kael nodded slowly. For 20 years. And I believed them. His voice carried quiet shame. I failed him. Commander Thorne looked into the fire. No, my king. They deceived all of us. Kael remained silent. But inside he knew the truth. A king should have searched harder. The next morning the mountains finally opened into a vast frozen valley. Elara stopped breathing. The battlefield stretched farther than she could see. Broken swords still protruded from the earth. Collapsed wagons lay buried beneath snowdrifts. Old shields rested against frozen trees. Time itself seemed to have stopped here. Commander Thorne whispered. No one has disturbed this place for 20 years. Kael slowly stepped onto the battlefield. I remember every step. He walked toward a narrow mountain pass. This is where Rowan stood. Elara followed quietly. The pass was barely wide enough for 3 soldiers. Towering cliffs rose on both sides. Anyone defending this place could hold back an army. Kael stopped. He stood here. He told me to run. He smiled. And then, his voice broke. I left him. Elara gently placed a hand on his arm. My father chose that. Kael looked away. I know. That doesn't make remembering easier. Commander Thorne suddenly knelt near a pile of frozen rocks. My king. Come here. Half buried beneath ice was a weathered wooden chest. Unlike the one at Rowan's grave, this one bore the royal seal. Together they broke the frozen lock. Inside lay dozens of military medals, battle reports, official commendations. Every document had one name written across it. General Marcus Vallon. Kael frowned. Marcus. He wasn't even here. Commander Thorne quickly searched the reports. His face hardened. They gave him every honor, every victory, every reward. Elara looked at the papers. But these battles were my father's. Kael slowly nodded. History crowned the wrong man. The realization struck them all at once. Someone had stolen Rowan's legacy. Not by accident, by design. Before anyone could speak again, one of the wolves began digging furiously beneath the snow. Within moments its paws struck metal. The others rushed forward. Together they uncovered a rusted iron shield. Across its surface were dozens of deep claw marks. Elara picked it up carefully. Something was carved into the back. Small letters, worn by time. Her father's initials. Tears filled her eyes. This was his. Kael gently accepted the shield. The front was badly damaged. One enormous crack ran through its center. Embedded inside the broken metal was the tip of an old spear. Kael closed his eyes. This is the spear meant for me. He could almost see Rowan standing there again, holding the shield, taking the impact, refusing to fall. Commander Thorne bowed his head. The shield saved the future king. Elara held the battered shield against her chest. For the first time in her life, she felt proud. Not because her father had been a warrior, but because he had chosen compassion over glory. Suddenly, a sharp whistle echoed across the valley. Kael's eyes snapped open. Take cover. Arrows rained from the cliffs above. The 20 white wolves exploded into motion. Some leaped toward the rocks while others surrounded Elara. Steel clashed against stone. Commander Thorne led the charge uphill. Masked soldiers poured from hidden caves. They found us, one shouted. Kael shifted into his enormous white wolf and crashed into the enemy line like an avalanche. Snow erupted beneath his paws. One attacker after another fell. The battle spread across the frozen valley. Elara grabbed her father's shield and pulled an injured royal guard behind a fallen wagon just before another arrow struck the wood. She wasn't a warrior, but she refused to run. Minutes later, the attackers broke formation. They're retreating, Commander Thorne shouted. No, Kael growled. They came for something. The Alpha King searched the battlefield. Then he noticed it. The old military chest. It was gone. Someone had stolen every document, every report, every piece of evidence. When a single folded page fluttered across the snow, Elara caught it before the wind carried it away. It wasn't a battle report. It was a list of witnesses. Every name had been crossed out. Except one. Commander Thorne read the final line aloud. His voice became almost a whisper. Elias Blackwood. Kael looked up sharply. Impossible. Commander Thorne stared at the page. He was declared dead after Moonpine. A slow voice echoed from behind the frozen cliffs. That's what they wanted everyone to believe. Everyone turned. An old man slowly stepped into the light. His gray beard reached his chest. A long scar crossed the left side of his face. His tired eyes settled on Kael, then on Elara. Finally, he smiled. I've been waiting 20 years. For Rowan's daughter.